little shack's just a cardboard box at $80 a month.
Your life is adorable.
I know somebody in West Egg.
I don't know a single person that side of the bay.
Oh, you must know Gatsby.
Gatsby? What Gatsby?
So before recording this, I've gone back and reread the book and watched 3 of the film adaptations again, because the last time was 2013. Seeing as though the book is very much an internal dialogue through the viewpoint of Nick Carraway, it makes it difficult to put to film because it's Nick's perspective. In this video, I'll primarily be focusing on the 2013 adaptation directed by Baz Lurmann, but I'll also be making comparisons to the others. The other 2 being the 1974 adaptation directed by Jack Clayton and the one from 2000 directed by Robert Markowitz, released as a TV movie. Both the 1974 adaptation and the one from 2000 stick very closely to the source material, but the 2013 one seems to take the most artistic liberties. But that's okay, because you need to service the film that you're making, not everything in the book. When comparing Clayton and Lurmann's adaptations, there is something that is very much apparent. What's apparent is that in Clayton's adaptation, it's unclear who the main character actually is. Because the novel is from Nick's perspective, you think that it's Nick. But Redford has more screen time than Watterson. In the other 2 adaptations that I mentioned, it's very clear that it's Nick's story. Lurmann, in an interview with Warner Brothers, states, "It's really a novella. It's a very compressed book with a lot of density, but the problem that everyone's had with it, as a film, is that it's almost entirely internal. It's the internal narrative of Nick Carraway." And so, in that moment, I went, I want to solve that problem. But how do you solve that problem without it being distracting to an audience? Lurmann later goes on by stating that essentially the problem with it is it's got to be a lot of voiceover, disembodied voiceover. And by that I mean, you hear a voice talking. So do you just have him read the book? The problem with that is that the audience can become very disconnected from it. It's great to find a reason why you actually see a character, not just speak, but you see him tell somebody. That person being a psychiatrist that Nick goes to go see after these events occur, so he can look back on it and work through what happened to him. Now I'd like to go through an excerpt to show how it changes from the novel to the film adaptations. Gatsby, who was in the room only moments before, went around the back of the house to make a grander entrance. "Well, that's funny," I exclaimed. "What's funny?" She turned her head as there was a light-defined knocking at the door. I went out and opened it. Gatsby, pale as death, with his hands plunged like weights into his coat pockets, was standing there in a puddle of water, glaring tragically into my eyes. With his hands still in his coat pockets, he stalked by me into the hall, turned sharply, as if there was a wire, and disappeared into the living room. It wasn't a bit funny. For half a minute, there wasn't a sound. Then from the living room I heard a sort of choking murmur, and part of a laugh, followed by Daisy's voice on a clear artificial note. "I certainly am awfully glad to see you again." A pause. It endured horribly. I had nothing to do in the hall, so I went into the living room. Gatsby, his hands still in his pockets, was reclining against the mantelpiece. This is how the scene played out in the 1974 adaptation.
Daisy, I'd like you to meet my neighbor, Mr. J. Gatsby. Mr. Gatsby, this is my cousin, Daisy Buchanan.
We've met before.
We haven't met for many years.
8 years. Next November. Well, shall we have some tea?
This scene relies on score too much, and isn't as effective as it could be. This is the same scene, but in the TV movie.
You know. Funny?
That must be the corpse.
Hello, sport. I was just passing by. Thought I'd stop in out of the rain.
Oh, well, we were just gonna sit down for some tea. Want to join us, Gatsby? This is, Daisy. She's...
We've met.
Well, I certainly am awfully glad to see you again. It was a long time ago.
5 years. In November.
Jordan says she's been seeing a lot of you.
No, probably more than she'd like.
Oh, no. She'd be completely bored without you. She actually cares for you. I know Jordan, and that's saying a lot.
Well, I must admit I care for her, too.
Tom was a complete beast to her last week.
Sorry.
Here the scene is shown as a less perfect meeting and is indicative of how these characters would actually act in this situation. This is Baz Luhrmann's interpretation of the scene.
Would you?
That's funny.
What's funny?
Ah. What are you doing?
I'm certainly glad to see you again.
I'm certainly glad to see you as well.
We've met before. Have someone come prepare this immediately. Sorry about the clock.
That's an old clock?
Lovely, though, a lovely clock.
Yes.
We haven't met for many years.
5 years next November.
Notice how all three of them are uncomfortable, and that comes down to the actor's performance.
I'll be back.
This is a terrible mistake.
Just embarrassed. Daisy's embarrassed, too.
She's embarrassed.
You're acting like a little boy. Not only that, you're rude. Daisy's sitting in there all alone. Old sport.
just have to pop into town.
Tom?
I'll be right back.
Nick, I've got to speak to you about something.
Yes, I'll be right back.
God, this was a mistake. This was a terrible, terrible mistake.
You're just embarrassed. Stacey's embarrassed too.
She's embarrassed.
Yes, just as much as you are.
Talk so loud.
Hey, you're acting like a little boy. You're being rude. Daisy's in there all alone, and you're...
So as you can see in the TV movie, the actors play it more reserved, and then in Lurmann's version it's more expressive, the expressive one being more appealing to an audience. I'd say of the three, the Clayton adaptation is less interesting than Markowitz's being a bit more contrived. So I'd say in reference to the book, Lurmann's adaptation of the scene is a bit more close to F. Fitzgerald's vision of how it would actually play out.
Well, Robert Redford was responsible for this movie, my version, because my dad ran the cinema for a short time, and I was a Witch Catch the Sundance Kid. I was 7. I went, that is the coolest man I've ever seen, and his sidekick ain't bad either. And then I saw Sting, and I went, those two are super cool. I saw Gatsby, and I remember thinking, he's cool, it's beautiful, but I didn't know who Gatsby was. Now, Francis Ford Coppola, who helped me on this, who wrote the screenplay to the Redford version, said what I did was I went out to all the other texts of Fitzgerald. So Francis was a great support. I even read a book actually about the making of that 70s version, and Redford himself wanted to put more of the flashback in. He wanted to put the Dan Cody story in, and they didn't do it. He was right. So I don't think in any way there's that version, and it looks like Hamlet. Which is your favourite one? The one that was done by Olivier, or the one you saw done by the young kid in London last month? If it's a great work, it's there to be done many times in many different ways.
So really there is no one way to tell this story, but I do believe the technique of show don't tell is definitely more engaging to an audience. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope to be uploading more content soon. I'll see you in the next video.